Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beginner's Mind series. As we begin and as I introduce and welcome our special guest today, I'd love to hear which city are you logging in from and what's the temperature there like? Because it's really hot in Punjab right now. I think one of the hottest days we've had in June thus far. How do you like the grays, by the way? Yeah, a few streaks of gray, huh? Some shades of gray. Until my daughters compel me and force me into making sure, Daddy, you gotta color your hair. You're not that old yet, right? I got these few streaks, but thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here, for supporting, for commenting, for liking and sharing the Beginner's Mind series interviews. Once again, tell me which city you're logging in from, what's the temperature they're like, and additionally, also tell me which out of all these interviews has been your favorite thus far. I'd love to hear your comments on that as we wait and we welcome our special guest for today. Folks, some of you might be familiar with that, my story. I've shared that in several videos when I took my huge leap of faith, quitting my job in the hospitality industry in 2007, leaving Great Britain, moving back to India, discovering what my passion was, starting my entrepreneurial journey. But what a lot of you do not know is what went before it. So it wasn't like one defining moment, but however, I do remember at the coaching academy in London having this very powerful conversation. You know, we were divided into little groups and the coach wanted us to discover our strengths, right? And we were divided into small groups of two each, and we had to play the coach for the other person, asking them two simple questions. Number one, what do you love doing the most? What is that you love doing the most, and how can you turn that into a profession? Now, I believe that if I look for defining moments, those two questions would be the defining moment that were sort of triggered what was already in my head. Our moderator specifically told us to resist the temptation of not giving advice, just using questions and the power of a good conversation to ensure that the partner ends up with something concrete in their hands. Now, we did create a video on this also. It's titled The Two Questions That Changed My Life. It was shot in 2013. Go watch that video just to check out how my hairstyle looked like back in 2013. But jokes apart, my partner obviously did a very good job because I did walk away with something very concrete. And I walked away with the conviction, with the belief, with the clarity that I am ready to quit my career, my hospitality trajectory, what I was doing in the hospitality industry, and start afresh, which was a major, major change for me in something to do with people development. Or, I wanted to be a speaker, trainer, et cetera, that was when I first discovered the power of a transformational conversation, the power of questions. That was when I first discovered it. And our special guest today specializes in helping people and leaders across the world do just that. And she specializes in helping leaders and people expand their minds, and she transforms lives through the power of conversations. I'm talking about none other than Dr. Marcia Reynolds, who was also the 5th global president of the ICF and recently inducted into the ICF Circle of Distinction for her contributions to the global coaching community. She's considered one of the world's leading coach and number 4 coach on the global gurus list. Excerpts from her books, Outsmart Your Brain, The Discomfort Zone, and The Wonder Woman have appeared in business and psychological publications worldwide. Her latest bestseller, Coach the Person, Not the Problem. I love that. Coach the Person, Not the Problem, A Guide to Using Reflective Inquiry, was released in June 2020. So I do think she's been making the best out of the lockdown. To raving reviews across the world and has become an international #1 bestseller in business and coaching books. She holds a doctorate in organizational psychology and has 2 master's degrees in communication and adult learning, spending 25 years deepening her coaching skills and teaching coaching to leaders across the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Marcia Reynolds with a round of virtual applause.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
I really appreciate you taking out the time for this conversation. And I saw that the string of emails going back and forth between our office and, with all that patience, thank you from the core of my heart for taking out the time for this conversation. And you look lovely. And let me kickstart with my first question. Coaching has been around for a long time now, right? And yet there are several misconceptions people always ask, including people who are familiar somewhat with the subject matter of what coaching is. Is it mentoring? Is it counseling? Is it like seeing a shrink? Is it therapy? I'm going to start with a very simple question here, Dr. Marcia, which is what is coaching and what is it not? And how can leaders make the best out of it?
Okay. Well, one of the things you said was that I have, 2 masters, and one of them is in adult learning. Mm-hmm. And I got that many, many years ago, but it put me on a quest of discovery. Is like, what really changes people's minds? What helps them to learn in a way that will change their behavior? Not just learn what to do, because we often know what to do, but we still don't do it. And I found that because I ran training departments in companies for years. People would say, oh, I love this training class. This was fabulous. Uh-huh. And then they'd go out, they'd try things. As soon as it was awkward, they'd quit.
Right. That's why so many people have the same set of New Year resolutions year after year after year.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, and it's why telling people what to do doesn't work. It's a waste of time. Mm-hmm. They'll say, okay, I'll do it. But then it doesn't change their mind and doesn't change their behavior.
Right.
So I kept, studying and researching and trying to make my courses better. And it wasn't until I found coaching and I experienced the power of coaching, which again made me go, I need to research this, and that led me to my doctorate to understand what goes on in the brain that differentiates coaching from everything else. And that's when I discovered that, for me, coaching is a learning technology. It's not consulting, it's not therapy, it's not all those things we call it. It's how people learn.
Learning technology.
When we get people to think for themselves, it's operating on a different part of the brain than when we mentor them, which is just, telling them, here's what I did, you should do this. Or managing by our own experiences and I don't have time to coach, and so I'm just going to tell them what to do. It's like that operates in short-term memory in the cognitive brain, and we don't efficiently remember things there. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't necessarily change behavior, and so it's not efficient. It's not effective. And you can scare people into learning, but then that operates in an entirely different part of the brain as well. And so we want them to be motivated and to desire to make the change, as well as to automatically make the change because we see things differently. And that's what coaching does. So it's the best learning technology we have right now.
I love that. Learning technology. Coaching is a learning technology now. One of the other questions that comes up very frequently, Dr. Marcia, is about, especially at the workplace, do I need to be certified in order to have a powerful conversation that could trigger change? Should I be going through formal training in order to say, I could coach, quote unquote, at the workplace? What are your thoughts on that? Or can people use certain tools, integrate them? As you rightly said, when we're firefighting, when there's a lot of performance pressure, when there's a lot going on at the workplace, all of these new stuff that we've learned, it goes out of the window. So what we resort to is muscle memory. And muscle memory is, okay, everybody listen to what I have to say. I know it better because I've been there, done that. And that does not often result into development of other people. They're always dependent upon the leader for instructions. So tell us, from a workplace perspective, how can managers and leaders use coaching tools? Do they need to be certified? Or if not, are there things they can integrate into their leadership styles in order to help people flourish?
Yeah. Well, my ideal situation, which I have done with a number of companies, is that I do work with some internal people. Often it's HR business partners, the learning development people, and help them to at least have a initial level of certification, so they can then internally support leaders. So there's more intensity at that level. But when it comes to leaders, I've been teaching for 25 years a coaching approach to leaders. So no, I'm not going to make them into a coach in a day or two. Right. And yet I can give them enough tools to initiate a conversation that's going to be more powerful. Right. By starting with first just, you may lay out a problem. Like, here's a problem that needs to be changed. But what are your thoughts? And then we need to listen to people's stories and appreciate how they see things right now, even if we see it differently. And then I'm gonna challenge you, Simmer. Mm-hmm. Coaching is not asking questions. Okay? That first I would start by just, let me summarize what I heard you say. So I think I heard you say what's most important is this, or what you really want is this. Mm-hmm. That first I use reflection and then ask the question, which makes you stop and think about what you just said far more than if I just ask you a question. And so if leaders just listen to the story, pick out key elements, reflect back, summarize, give back, the essential elements of what they heard, and then ask the question, what does that mean to you in the goal you want to achieve? Is that how you see the situation? How long has this been going on? But you've got to summarize first before you ask the question. But leaders can do that. Mm-hmm. And people then feel heard, they feel valued, they feel significant in just that short time.
Right. And that is so very important.
Instead of the leader just telling me what to do and thinking I'm an idiot.
Right, because as you rightly said, one of the core human needs is, have I been understood or not? And it's both ways. It's leaders expecting that from their people, and the followers also expecting from the leader, I've been understood, I'm in the loop, I know what's going on. Exactly. And mine was probably, as we began, was probably a more simplistic, superficial view of what I thought coaching was, which is just asking questions. But as you rightly said, it's first stepping into, I love what you said in one of your videos, stepping into their stories, because you said this in one of your presentations. And guys, I would highly recommend you go and visit and subscribe to Dr. Marcia's YouTube channel, where you'll find demo coaching sessions and keynotes and so many other resources. But you shared this PowerPoint deck in one of the videos where you said you can't just tell people to change. They're stuck in their stories. So as you rightly observed, the first step is to perhaps maybe step into their stories. Say, hey, I'm going to listen to your story, but without getting affected with that story, but to listen to it and then move on to the questions. Now, but a lot of corporate learning and development initiatives, Dr. Marcia, till date revolve around telling. And your PowerPoint, that slide said you can't just tell people to change because they're stuck in their stories. And yet, a lot of major organizational development initiatives, culture development initiatives are, let's bring in this expert, let's have a keynote from this person, let's have a TED Talk or something else. It's a lot of telling going on. So how can corporations, how can our approach to learning and development evolve from what we current telling method into coaching at the workplace?
Well, to recognize that when we tell, like if I'm doing a keynote or I'm training, I'm telling you. Mm-hmm. But telling can only inspire you to try, to think, maybe there's something here I should look into. So, teaching, speaking, telling is just an event. It's not a process. And so, again, it might inspire me to learn more. Right. But then the coaching is where you stay with me by my side as I try things out, stumble a little bit, and start to integrate the new behavior into my repertoire. Because learning new behavior is a process. It takes time. Mm-hmm. And so, you can combine the inspiration with the coaching, and that's very effective.
Indeed. So to have more to initiate, I think one of the simple things even for someone who's not certified, does not have formal knowledge of coaching, is to have more of these open conversations, right? That's one of my basic takeaways. And then to listen unconditionally without necessarily stepping into their world or getting affected by their emotions, to sort of get a feel of where they're coming from before you use powerful tools such as questions, which I'm sure we'll talk about as we go forward in this conversation. Your website, let me remind all the viewers, the subject of today's discussion is using the power of coaching to transform minds. Dr. Marcia, I'm going to ask a personal question, which I came across a piece on your website, which mentions at 20, you found yourself at rock bottom after landing in jail for drug abuse. You were angry, disconnected, yet your remarkable cellmates pushed you to acknowledge your inner gifts. May I ask, was there a conversation that transformed your life, or have there been conversations that transformed your life? Because it's been an inspiring success story from that to being one of the top 4 coach in the world. Was there a conversation that...
Yeah, I think she was just sick of me whining.
Right.
Seriously, you're stuck with people all day long, and I was feeling sorry for myself, but we had established a relationship and really had respect for each other. And I, that was such a great learning for me, actually. And 40 years ago, spending some time in jail with people who have far less privilege than me. And, and no, very little, if any, opportunity to get out and accomplish things in this life. And so I was sitting there feeling sorry for myself, and she was like, "Oh, brother," and just, she got up in my face and said, "Really, honestly, you have no idea who you are." And that's when she in my face said, "You're so smart, you're strong, you care about people," and then basically said, "You need to get out there because you have the opportunities, the privilege that I don't have. Wow. Use your gifts, accomplish something." And it just, the way she said it, we have to have the courage to be direct and honest with people. True. So people always ask me about my coaching, and I always say I'm a very direct, to the point, honest coach. I don't dance around things. And the executives I work with always appreciate that. And that's what she was. It's just like, it opened my eyes up that not just that I wasn't using my gifts, but I wasn't using the larger gift of the life that I had been given. Wow. And that was my biggest crime, not the other things that I did. That was my biggest crime. So, it inspired me to go out and make a difference with other people, because that's what she did for me. She saved my life. And so I wanted to save other people's lives. Because I had a criminal record, I couldn't go into the criminal justice system, and a lot of places wouldn't talk to me. So I went to school, got degrees, moved into corporate leadership development, because they didn't care what I did years ago. They wanted to know what I could do for them now, and so I got the opportunities to really start demonstrating. And even that, the work I did in corporations, I always felt was helping people recognize their potential, having them connect with each other better so they felt the power inside of them to move forward, and help leaders to understand how they can do that with others.
So that really triggered, it really transformed you. You went out and you equipped yourself with 2 master's degrees, not 1, but 2, and a doctorate, and really changed the whole trajectory of your life. And I think the message is loud and clear to everybody who's watching right now. If you've hit rock bottom, it's a good opportunity to build a solid foundation. It's a good opportunity for a brand new start. That is a powerful, inspiring story there, Dr. Marcia. And for everybody who's listening, while we move to the next question, tell us in the comments section, have there been conversations in your life which turned your life around? And just as I shared mine as we started this conversation, and Dr. Marcia shares hers, the message is very, very clear that sometimes in unexpected places, people can be right in your face and tell you the truth, and that could be a moment that could actually transform your entire life. Thank you for being open with us on that subject, Dr. Marcia. Your next book is something that I love to talk about. Coach the person, not the problem. Conventional wisdom. Everywhere when I read about interpersonal skills, it's about, solve the problem. Don't worry about the person, and it's situational. That's what I've learned, and that's what is being taught for several years. But your book and the title flips that conventional wisdom, and talk to us about this model of coaching the person, not the problem, and why it works.
Yeah. Well, the foundation of coaching is that we look at the person in front of us and we see them as creative, resourceful, and whole. They're smart. They're just seeing things this way, and maybe they need to see things slightly differently. Mm-hmm. But I believe in their capability to solve the problem if I help them expand their perspective or see things in a different way. And so I'm going to coach their thinking. Okay, so they can discover, which is going to change their brain anyway. And instead of it just us looking at the problem, which is, again, they've got their story around the problem. They may listen to you out of respect for your authority, but they're still thinking, yeah, but I still see it this way. And so
stuck in their stories. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so and when they see it, like I said, it changes their brain, so it's like they automatically know what they're supposed to do differently. They don't need you to tell them, and again, how much more powerful is that? So like a metaphor that a friend of mine gave me, he said, like when you help a child to ride a bike, they can ride it. They don't know it yet. Mm-hmm. They don't know it yet. Wow. So, you
it's an entirely different way to look at it. It's a very empowering way to look at the situation, right? Mm-hmm.
Right. But they will. So they may fall off a few times. That's okay. You encourage them to get back on. It may take a day or two, but they do. And within no time, they're riding. And that's what we have to believe in people. They can ride that bike, mm-hmm. If we just stay by their side, and help them to see how they can do it on their own and then to have the courage to move forward. Mm-hmm.
Right. I love that. The example that you just gave is knowing as a parent, because my daughters are learning how to ride a bike. And, at times I'm scared. What should I be doing? Right. And I've got all these fears. Should I be projecting onto, how to go about that process? But I love that approach, which I think leaders can follow too. Which is not just believe, their potential to ride a bike because you've been through that and it's possible. And then, of course, you also know at the same time they're going to get hurt. So, but at the same time, you are approaching that situation in an empowering way rather than saying, hey, you don't know how to do it yet. And these are the steps, go attend a workshop, et cetera, et cetera. Different way to look at it. And a couple of times you mentioned people being stuck in their stories inside their head. And I'm curious about that. Which are we talking about limiting beliefs here? Are we talking about mental conditioning, previous mental conditioning? When you refer to the stories inside our heads, what exactly are you referring to? And how, as an inspirational speaker, that's what I try to do, right? I try to break that story and probably, show them another way of doing and say, hey, here's how you could live your life, right? That's what I do. And I'm sure that's what a lot of influencers, coaches, trainers across the world, that's what we all want to achieve in the end. If somebody is living with a bad story, to show them another one. How do stories matter? How do we acquire them? And what are your tips on influencing internal change here?
Yeah. Well, first I want to say as a speaker, you can certainly inspire them to see things differently. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do things differently, but we start with seeing, so there's value in that. It's always great to add coaching to training and speaking to ensure long-term change. We live by our stories because we can't stop every moment and say, so what's going on here? How should I see this? So our stories are survival. You wake up in the morning, you have a morning story. This is what I do every morning.
Mm-hmm.
So your brain is a box of stories, and that's how we navigate our days. Yes, they're built on our past experience from the time we start comprehending life. We start to develop the stories that we live by. They will change, be modified with all of our experiences and our learning. So throughout time, we do continually change. I'm a different person and see things differently than, 10 years ago, than last year, But I protect my stories because they're my survival. I have to have them so I can quickly make instantaneous decisions. I don't even know I'm making decisions. I just act based on the story that I pull out. And so I have to know how to do that in order to survive, in order to be in my day on a spontaneous, efficient way. So because it's essential to my actions and my survival, my brain protects my stories and says, no, your story is correct. Mm-hmm. And so you may tell me what to do and I might say, okay, but my brain's thinking that doesn't match my story, and so I'm going to find a way to sabotage.
Instinct, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm going to find a way to sabotage what you're telling me, or I'm just not going to do it. So it's not really, it's the instinctual action. Uh-huh. Okay. But getting into instinct is an entirely different conversation. That's a bodily wisdom, not necessarily a cognitive. So again, we pull forward our stories, and the brain is actually looking at the story and acting on the story. We're just not consciously doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would it be right to say that until we disrupt, and I read that word somewhere, I heard you use it in one of your videos, coaches are disruptors of internal stories. Yeah. So would it be right to assume until people disrupt that we are going to be the product of our stories going forward if there's no disruption?
Absolutely, because it feels safe.
Right.
Even if we know the story doesn't serve us anymore, it feels safe. So it was actually a neuroscientist that said, in order for us to change our behavioral patterns, there must be an external disruptor. And in fact, it was the neuroscientist was Michael Gazzaniga, and he wrote a book on free will. And basically, he was saying we don't have free will. Mm-hmm. We think we do, but no, our stories guide us, and we believe our stories. And unless somebody and the disruption is that, I just say back to you what I hear you say, and I ask you a question about that, and makes you stop and examine your story in a way you can't do for yourself, because your brain, your ego will stop you from examining your story. Mm-hmm. So we need someone outside of us to help us to stop the normal thinking patterns.
Narrative, right. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so that's where coaching comes in. So you telling me what to do could disrupt my thinking, but it's iffy, but if you, right. But if you make me stop and think about my thinking, you just say it out loud. Oftentimes, when I just, summarize to someone what they just said, that creates a breakthrough. They're like, wow, I said that, didn't I? Right. Now that you say it, I had that happen just yesterday. I was coaching someone, and there was a number of times she said, now that you say it out loud, it makes me realize.
Right, you can affirm it.
Yeah, and so it's like I didn't even have to ask the question. Usually I pair it with, but I didn't even have to with her. Mm-hmm. She's like, oh, wow, right. I mean, she's so smart and so quick. She just needed to hear her thinking.
So it's just there at the surface as a coach through your tools, one of them being reflective inquiry, which we'll talk about next. You uncover, you sort of guide people. I'm reminded of two very interesting things here. One is Les Brown talking about, in one of his speeches, he said, you can't see the big picture as long as you're stuck in the frame. And I think that's really appropriate here. It's
That's exactly
we're
it.
stuck in that frame and we can't see who else is in there, with the context of it. So we need to step outside and coaching, as you rightly
see
said.
the frame. It was actually Richard Boyatzis who said you can't, we always ask people to see beyond the box. He says, well, you can't really see outside of the box until you see the box.
Right.
And it's the same thing with our stories and the frames. You can't really see beyond the frame until you actually see the frame and go, oh, look, that's how I'm framing it. Mm-hmm. Isn't there another way? Can I expand the frame?
Mm-hmm. No, that's really powerful, because I tell you why. I used to do in the 2-day long workshops. I don't do many of them now. I do mostly keynotes now, but I used to do 2-day long workshops. And what used to happen, I was inspired by an article in the Harvard Business Review, which talked about, I think the title was, What's Your Story? And based on that article, which talks about, the power of a story, our conditioning, we did a little exercise with the participants. We said, okay, why don't you guys write down independently what is the story? If you meet a stranger right now, what will you tell them about the story of your life thus far? The good, the bad, etc., the future, how your past is going to affect your future. And then exchange that with each other. And that was such a powerful exercise. There were people in tears all across the room just by sharing, because I thought, and I did not intervene in this process, but what I thought is that they're having this self-realization somewhere just by sharing it with another person. They're pausing and thinking about, what's right, what has served them well, what hasn't served them well. So thank you for that message there. I think for everybody who's tuning in right now, really important, get an external disruptor, please. Someone who's experienced, someone who can help you, someone not just pull you out of the frame and say, hey, look, there's the big picture. In NLP, we were taught that, somebody who's focused on the details, and some people are big picture. So if you're always focused on the details, perhaps you're missing out on the big picture of your life. And one of the tools that you mentioned in your book, I think that goes in the subtitle of your book, is reflective inquiry. You talked a lot about it. It helps, you mentioned it helps you achieve breakthroughs in your coaching sessions. As an organization leader, for someone or a manager of a team who's listening right now, are there tools, are there questions I could use with my team to use reflective inquiry to help them be better, or to overcome interpersonal barriers? There's a lot of assumptions that come in, and people become defensive for no reason at all. And can I learn something from reflective inquiry? What is it, and how can I learn? Yeah.
Well, first off, let me say that most of the time, all the books that I have written, I wrote because I saw something missing or people not doing something essential. So when I said to you earlier about questions, that's been kind of a source of irritation for me.
I can imagine
that many coaching schools and people think coaching is just asking questions. And those critics of coaching will even say, well, what value is it just to ask questions? Even Marshall Goldsmith has said that, just asking questions is stupid. Well, let me just say that I was a part of writing the initial ICF competencies. We never indicated that coaching is a question asking tool. Okay. There was always the behavior markers of reflect the emotions you see, summarize and paraphrase the keywords. Those were always a part of coaching. So that it flipped into only asking questions, I don't know where that came from, but it's
someone
not.
like me probably oversimplified it. Right.
Well, and it's interesting. I've had this conversation with Michael Bungay-Stanier, who wrote the book, The Coaching Habit, the 8 Essential Questions Leaders Should Ask. And he said to me, he goes, but I'm not working with coaches. I'm working with leaders. And I'm like, yes, and the questions are critical, and he laid out important questions. But if you just ask me those questions and I don't feel that you've heard me and that you understand me, then the questions may not land. So again, I come out of learning technology, and there was the person who actually defined coaching wrote a book in 1910 1910,
Wow.
called How We Think.
Okay.
You know, and it was a guy named John Dewey who wanted to reform the educational system, and he wanted teachers to have their young students
Wow.
to think more broadly for themselves by using, he coined the term reflective inquiry, by saying, okay, so this is what you just said, how you see the situation, and then asking a question to make the child listen to themselves, because often they were just repeating, you know, what their parents said, what their friends said. They weren't thinking for themselves. But if the teacher would summarize what they heard, they're like, oh, huh. And they start to think about their thinking and then ask the question. Well, he didn't succeed because our educational system, you know, stuck with just telling people what to do.
Right.
You know, but
in the industrial age, right? We wanted compliance number one.
Absolutely. So, but he coined it. And so reflective inquiry is what I said before. A leader, if you just, even if you first lay out, well, here's the problems that we're facing, and a change needs to take place. So you can just lay out the problem. But I would say then always add, before you even ask them what their story is, I would add something significant. I know that you are committed to achieving your goals, and you're just, you know, doing some things that are keeping you from that. Or I know you want to be seen as a leader by others, but what you're doing is getting in the way of that. Would you be interested in having a conversation with me where we could look at together, you know, what's going on now and what you might do differently to achieve your goals? So always focus the conversation on something important to them. Otherwise, they're going to say, oh, well, leader, that's what you want, you know, but that doesn't serve me. You know, so even, or it could be our goals. You know, we both want to see this team achieve more together. You know, so here's the situation. Here's how it's impacting what you want for yourself. Would you be interested in having this conversation? And then go into, tell me how you see it. I really, really want to know your perspective. You know, so we start from there, not mine, you know, because mine may not match yours. And so I need to hear yours, and to be sincerely curious and care how they see it. You know, so it's like I always say, be compassionately curious. Don't make them wrong. Just understand that's the perspective they're bringing to the conversation. And this is where we start. This is where we start. And we just repeat it back and start asking, well, how do you think that relates to how other people see the situation, how other people define leadership? You know, is that your definition of leadership? Is there a conflict there? You know, so we stay really curious about how their story is creating the situation. So it then helps them to see how their story fits into this, and maybe they can see a larger picture where a shift in their story would be helpful in them achieving their goals.
And I think it's a great approach. And what I also feel is that leaders, managers, team leaders, they'll need to develop a lot more, as you rightly said, sincere compassion and also patience to go through something like this, rather than, it's always really easy quickly
and
to...
courage. Yeah. The courage to not know.
Wow.
So many leaders think I'm supposed to know, I'm supposed to have all the answers. And if I go into the conversation saying, I don't know what the answer is, let's discover it together, that can take courage, because they think, oh, people will judge me that I don't have the answers. No, they're going to judge you that you're not listening to them.
Absolutely. And the courage also to have this conversation in the first place, because so many leaders, so many team leaders, managers that I know I've worked with, they've run away from difficult conversations. They would rather leave it unaddressed. They would rather it become something bigger. and then create a scene out of it rather than address it. So it does take courage, to say, hey, we need to talk about this and approach it. I think just the listening part, as you rightly said, the giving options part is going to be so therapeutic for many people on the other side, that they open up, and once they open up, you can move forward to the next level. Talk to us about non-reactive empathy, please. I read about that in one of your. I heard about that in one of your videos. Non-reactive empathy. The whole leadership training machine is going all in for empathy. To be a good leader, develop empathy. Empathy. This is something new. Let's talk about non-reactive empathy from Dr. Marcia Reynolds.
Okay. Well, so many times, especially that, you have to stand in their shoes. It's like, no, you don't. You'll get stuck in their shoes.
I like that.
It's like I do. Empathy is me taking in your story and the emotions that you feel about your story, and this is where your word instinct comes in, is that, I instinctively can get where you're at. But then I have to release it. I can't stay in your story. I can't get stuck in your emotions, because then I can't coach you. So I take it in, I understand it, and then I have to release it so I can come back to being compassionately curious and courageous in that moment. And so people often say to me, you always seem so calm, when you're coaching people, and, if they get reactionary, you just take it in, and stay curious. Like I did a demo coaching a couple of weeks ago, and the guy was very difficult. He was like, kept wanting to blame somebody else. And I said, it sounds to me as if you really want to change your behavior. No, I don't want to change her. That's not what I do, and that was okay. I still reflected it. And he came back to it much later in the conversation. He goes, yeah, I guess I do want her to change, and so I don't care how they react. I don't care. I just do my coaching, and I just offer it and let them accept it right now or not. Maybe they're not ready to hear it. That's okay. But I need to stay fully present.
Right.
If I'm stuck in their story, their emotions, I'm going to miss a key thing they tell me. So I take it in, I understand it, and then I breathe and let it go, and I come back and be present with them.
So it's like most people who would probably, whose mirror neurons probably would be activated, and they'll begin to react to that situation. You don't allow to do that yourself to do that in a coaching conversation. You're mindful, you're aware, you're appreciating their challenges, their issues, but at the same time, it's just like, you don't want a situation where one person was miserable earlier and now two people are miserable. Right? Am I getting that right? And then, because it's the story there.
And sometimes then they're going to feel badly because they made you feel miserable, and it's like, no, they're not responsible for my feelings. So, like, when somebody gets very sad, and then if the coach gets sad too, well, you've just gone down the rabbit hole. So even if somebody cries, I just give them the space to cry, no judgment. I don't jump in to fix them because that makes them weak. I don't jump up to get a Kleenex. Again, that makes them feel weak. I just hold the space, because all criers come out of it. There's an arc to all emotions. We're triggered, we have an intensity of the emotion, whether it's sadness or anger or fear, and then we start to come out of it. The brain starts to process it, and we come out. As a coach, if I allow the arc, then I can sense when they're starting to come out of it. Then I can step in and say, okay, would you be willing to share with me what you now see, what just happened there? So if we could see even tears as a way of washing away the past, so the person can see more clearly, we could see even tears as strength. Wow. Yeah.
Image that came to my mind, Dr. Marcia, is the story that I read. One guy trapped into a ditch shouting for help, and the other guy felt very empathetic towards him and jumped right into that ditch. And now there's two people.
Now there's two people stuck in the ditch.
Yes, that's what flashed in my mind when you were sharing your perspective on.
That's a great story. That's a great metaphor.
on non-reactive empathy. So you rather be outside and so that you can pull them out of it as a coach.
To stay in the coaching space. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. This has been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate your time and all the nuggets of wisdom that you've shared with the viewers. Guys, as we say goodbye to Dr. Marcia, can you please type in? It'll be great to hear from you all, whoever's tuned into this conversation. It'll be great to hear what your top takeaways are at the moment. Just type in a one-liner or 2 lines, what you feel is most practical that you can apply at your workplace, in your life. And Dr. Marcia, before we say goodbye, any parting words of inspiration for our viewers, especially for young people across the world who usually, this is very common among youngsters, I feel stuck. And my usual response is, well, the planet is whizzing around thousands of miles per hour, across the solar system. How can you're not stuck, you're feeling stuck. So any words of inspiration for young people across the world?
Yeah. Well, first off, in our conversations, whether you're a leader or you're a friend or a parent, is to remember that people want you to be present with them more than they need you to be perfect.
Wow.
So being present, you don't have to say the perfect thing or think through what you're going to say back to them. Just be present and care. Just be present and care. And feeling stuck, is a great place to say I'm stuck and start examining. So what's the story I'm stuck in? Mm-hmm. So you can start seeing those frames. Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful. I really loved what you said about the first part of what you said, being present, not being perfect. And yet so many of us, we strive for the books we buy, the seminars we attend, are to figure out what's the right thing to say here, what'll be the best thing to say.
Yeah, and that's our upbringing, isn't it? You got to get the A, you got to be perfect, instead of just being present.
Wow. I love that.
And caring. And wouldn't that change our world?
Of course it would. Yeah, definitely. And whether that's organizations, homes, societies, being present. Well, that's the note on which we'll finish this virtual conversation. Round of applause for you for your time.
Thank you.
And the parting message is loud and clear, guys. Spend some time with yourself on what the Buddhists say in the Zen philosophy. Learn to fill your own cup and be more present in the moment if you want to go out and heal the world and make it a better place. Dr. Marcia Reynolds, thank you so much for your time.
You're so welcome.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dr. Marcia Reynolds all the way from Phoenix, Arizona, on how we can use the power of coaching to transform lives and to transform minds. To know more about her work, you can visit her official website, which is www.covisioning.com. I repeat, www.covisioning.com, and subscribe to her YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Marcia Reynolds, where I believe she has a wealth of information there. For those of you who want to know more about the fascinating world of coaching, there's demo coaching sessions, there's keynotes, and a wealth of other information. A lot of new videos also coming out very frequently. And thanks and bye-bye from now. This was Simerjeet Singh with another episode of the Beginner's Mind series. Take care and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.